Good morning, Rotarians. Another Colorado Chamber of Commerce Day outside, but we are going to be enlightened today about mental health. Why don't you join me, please, in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and for the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And now Cynthia York is going to help us with our inspirational moment. And Cynthia is starting a new opportunity in her life. On Monday. So good luck to you and looking forward to your remarks.
So good afternoon. This is my first opportunity that I've been with the club. Many of you, unknowingly, have inspired me to live my life with passion and love others at all stages of my life. For example, there's a gentleman that I sat next to about 2 months ago who, after a very successful career and retirement, decided that he was bored with retiring. And then he, lo and behold, decided he wanted to become an appraiser of antique cars. Now, that was especially inspiring to me because I am from Detroit, and I still have quite the thing for cars, especially antique cars. And what it showed me and inspired me to believe is that I can do new things that excite me at any stage of my life. Another example are the men and women that I've seen here who have just shown amazing love to others by the financial support that they've provided to underprivileged children. And what those men and women have done, if they have inspired me to continually review the level of giving that I do. So in closing, what I'd like to say is thank you so much to all of you who have inspired me to be a better person and grow both emotionally and spiritually. And I hope to have the opportunity to return the favor. Thank you.
Cynthia, thank you. That was truly wonderful, and that is what Rotary is about. So let's enjoy our lunch and grab your seats. And today, now for the Secretary's report, we're going to hear from Larry Gloss, the infamous international and national fundraiser. So if you see him coming, hang on to your wallet. Larry?
You know, I do the same thing. I meet another fundraiser, I put my right hand back and shake with the left. I don't know if you've had that experience. Thank you to Ben Allen for hosting the September Rotary Connect, the happy hour this last Thursday. Rotary Connect meets on the fourth Tuesday of every month, so make sure you put that on your calendar. And is a great way to get to know your fellow Rotarians, because you have maybe 20 minutes here before you have to sit down. So as well as introducing potential new members to our club, it's a less formal and relaxed atmosphere to do that. For more information, contact the Rotary Connect coordinator, Lonnie. Lonnie, raise your hand. Where are you? There you are. Thank you. A big thank you to Peg Johnson. Peg? Where are you? Peg? There's Peg. As many of you know, Peg was responsible for coordinating last Saturday's Rotary family outing at the Wild Animal Sanctuary. You notice all the towels that were there? Well, over 100 people attended. All enjoyed a beautiful Saturday seeing wildlife in the natural setting. It's a delicious buffet that they had. I thought it was excellent. It was great fellowship. A 9-month-old grizzly bear was probably the star attraction. Our members also generously donated bags of apples for the bears and other items, on their wish list. And thank you to Val Hopkins for her generous matching donation collected at the meeting with the executive director, Pat. Craig. She also had adopted a tiger, which I thought was really cool. So President Andre also arranged for the donation of used towels from the DAC. So thank you, Andre. And so look for pictures that I took at the upcoming Kiwi newsletter. Donations are always helpful. Thursday, October 8th, will be a breakfast buffet meeting here at the DAC at 7:30 a.m. instead of our regular lunch meeting at the same day. Event registration email was emailed to each of you yesterday afternoon. It can be difficult for us to guess how many people to expect for our non-Rotary meetings, so please let us know ahead of time. You can do that online. Our program that day will be 50 years Saving the Souls of the City, Larimer Square, featured by Dana Crawford and Mike Maffei. Today, we have Elizabeth Bueller, Lonnie's guest and a potential member, and Jacob Day. Will you stand up, please? We also have Bruna Foley, the Denver Rotary Foreign Exchange student, with Lynn Dawson, and please. Larissa Alves is also a Denver Rotary Foreign Exchange student, and Lynn is also helping there. Very nice young ladies. Daniel Ho is a guest of Jim McGidney. Please stand. I'm not sure where he is. It's really great to have him involved. Also, Tom Crane and Jean Herman is a potential member, which is a good thing. Jeffrey Magnuson is a guest, also a potential member with Judge Sid Brooks. I had a chance to talk to him before. He's a glutton for punishment because he lived and worked in the Washington, D.C. area. So, welcome. And then we have Soleil Lavia and Mark Donovan as a guest. You know, I thought it appropriate, since I have a very limited period of time, to do, a Rotary dollar, a happy dollar. And what happened is that I got married, and it's been a long time. It's a good thing. Well, when I went down to Douglas County to sign the papers and raise the hand, the rest, they pointed me in the direction of marriage department, it's the bureau, and right underneath it had the mental health division. And I thought that was interesting. And seeing we have a topic dealing with mental health, I'm sure Mr. Rolanoff will tell us if the two are connected or not. Thank you very much.
So as you know, Branch Rickey, our signature fundraiser, is no more. And we are replacing it with a fabulous new event we're calling Dancing Through the Decades. And here to tell us about it today, we have Michelle Maldonado from Denver Kids. And, her title is so long and complicated that with the changes that have been going on in there, I'm just going to say the future CEO of Denver Kids.
No pressure there. Okay. So, as you know, Dancing Through the Decades is a fundraiser for the Rotary Foundation, the Denver Rotary Foundation, and it's also a celebration of the 70-year partnership between Denver Kids and Denver Rotary. Now, hopefully, all of you know that Denver Rotary, along with Denver Public Schools, co-founded Denver Kids. So, without the organization here, my job wouldn't exist. So thank you. When you are attending Dancing Through the Decades, you are directly supporting the work of Denver Kids. So if dancing and drinking and eating wasn't enough, know that you're doing a really good thing with the money that you're spending, either through sponsorship, your tickets, or donating or buying auction items. As hopefully many of you know, Denver Kids provides educational counseling to students in Denver public schools who are considered at risk. So primarily single guardian home or live at or below the poverty line. And your funding helps provide the educational counseling to about 1,400 students in Denver public schools. And we work to help the students overcome any barriers that may impede on the academic success in their students' lives. And so know that when you are purchasing tickets and having a lot of fun, you are supporting the work and helping more students in Denver public schools graduate high school, pursue post-secondary education, and become contributing members of the community, and hopefully future Rotarians. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Isn't that great? One of our very newest members, already so engaged and involved, is here at the podium. Thank you, Michelle. So now the man that cannot give up the podium is Mr. Jim Goddard. And Jim is president of 9 Health Fair. Today we talk about mental health. Jim's job is to make sure that everybody in Denver has healthy bodies for their healthy minds. So to do a check presentation from our Soup Day, Jim Goddard.
Thank you, Andre. What a perfect introduction. As you all know, as president, we're able to designate one of our Soup Day funds to a particular organization. I've had the pleasure of working with Metro Caring through 9 Health Fair and realized what a wonderful organization it was, not just for hunger relief, though that's so appropriate for Rotary. It's also concentrating on so many other services that help people. And in particular, as you all know, we want to find organizations that do a good job of showing the impact of what they do. Metro Caring does that very well. And in addition, if you think about hunger relief, and in particular Ryan Gallinal, who is joining me right here, will speak to you about how hunger relief helps in the concept of youth education. So Ryan, I'm here to give you a small token, but very symbolic token of Denver Rotary's support of both hunger relief as well as youth education. Ryan?
Well, thank you for this honor. In short, Metro Caring, we are a community of people that believe all should have access to healthy food. Operating Denver's largest hunger relief program that's directly serving families, Metro Caring's diverse approach to fighting hunger includes a fully stocked fresh food shopping market, nutrition and garden education. We also provide tools to help families become more self-reliant. Situated in the heart of Denver, Metro Caring this year is going to distribute 2 million pounds of nutritious food to low-income families and children. Beyond the healthiest food, Metro Caring is also teaching people about what it looks like to eat right, how to cook, and also grow your own. But here's the deal, folks. Hunger is a symptom. What's really going on beneath the surface is poverty. And that's why Metro Caring, we are teaching people about financial literacy, and we're also preparing them to work through our Seeds for Success job training program. Oftentimes I'm asked in closing, Ryan, why do you feed hungry people? Why do you work for a nonprofit like Metro Caring? And the answer is simple. It pays really well. No. I feed hungry people because food is the most basic of human needs. Consider 72% of students in the Denver public school system qualify for free and reduced meals. Think about that for a sec. That's 3 out of 4 kiddos in the state's second largest school district are either living at or near the poverty line. How can one be expected to succeed if they're not receiving proper nutrition? When kids don't have proper nutrition, literally you can take away IQ points because of underdevelopment in the brain. Food is the most basic of human needs, and that's why I feed hungry people. So on behalf of the thousands of families that are working towards self-reliance and working towards better health, thank you for this significant contribution.
Wow, is that passion or what? So these are the proceeds, of course, from our Soup Day. But, we keep seeing what a great investment we make in our community through your contributions. So we thank you very much for continuing to support the Denver Rotary Club. Now we're going to hear from Mark Donovan. And if you want to know what is happening in the legal world, the number one person who takes notes in courtrooms, Mr. Mark Donovan. Do I have that somehow right?
Thank you, Andre. That was close, very close. I'm here today for membership team, and we want to pose a question to you. Do you ever wonder what the world would look like without the Rotary Club of Denver? Think of the 1,400 Denver kids who would not have mentors, educational counselors, support beyond their homes at a far greater risk of dropping out of school because Denver kids would never have been created. Think of the girls in Bosnia at far greater risk of becoming victims of trafficking because Mike and Felicia Muftick never started a global grant supporting their counseling and education. Picture empty hospitals in Mexico, women who spend all day long carrying water from one place to another. The clubs here in our own region who would never have been founded because we wouldn't have been here to found them. For that matter, picture the worldwide projects that might never have gotten started because there was no Rotary Club of Denver to inspire such ambitious and far-reaching ventures. The student artists going unrecognized and uncelebrated. What would our world look like without the Rotary Club of Denver? For that matter, how would you be different without the Rotary Club of Denver? That's why it's so important that we continue to make the impact that we seek to make, and we do that by recruiting members. On behalf of membership team, I want you to do two things. Number one, I want you to talk about Rotary. Monday morning, I walked into my colleagues in our break room and talked about what an amazing time we had Saturday at the Wildlife Sanctuary. They commented, "Gosh, your Rotary Club does really cool stuff." And that's the kind of reputation we want to have. Think of the buzz that you can create by talking to your family, your friends, the people down the pew, and your new neighbors about Rotary. And number two, I want you to deputize your family and friends. On the way back to Denver on Saturday, how many people had the conversation in the car? "Gosh, who do you know who is already a great Rotarian but simply hasn't joined yet?" We know what it means to make an impact, and we know how Rotary impacts us. Talk about it, deputize others to recruit with you. That way, we make sure that there's always a world with the Rotary Club of Denver. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. I wanted to spend a minute talking a little bit about Denver kids. This begins the 70th year since Denver Rotary started Denver Kids as the Denver Boys Club. And we have seen a little bit of change and tumult going on, and we had very high hopes that the new CEO, Joe McClosey, was going to lead us into a whole new direction. But there has been some changes at the top, and so 3 key people plus Joe have left Denver Kids. But I think that the board has done a tremendous job in replacing him for the time being. And Nancy Folker, who is the chair of the board, immediate past, has decided to take over as COO. And they brought back Margaret Fulmer, who was the director, 3 directors ago. So we believe that by putting these 2 ladies in as interim directors, we're going to see a tremendous impetus in the right direction. So I have very high hope that Denver Kids is going in the right direction, that they have taken proactive measures to go strongly into the future. So if there are any questions, please see us. But, there are, of course, some internal issues that they cannot discuss. but they have a vision, they have a direction, they've got the right people in charge. So let's put our faith and hope that they are taking it in the right direction and that we'll be able to have a great celebration for the 70th anniversary as they announce the new CEO. So today we're going to talk about mental health. You know, and it is said that if you don't belong in a mental institution, you must be a very boring person. Okay? So I do believe that it is fun to not be boring. And there is a man by the name of James Gillespie who is a 3-year member of the Denver Rotary Club, who is truly passionate about mental health and homelessness and has made it his career and his job. And he will introduce Andrew Romanoff, our speaker. So let's show Andrew that we are not boring people, all right?
According to national statistics, in the time that it has taken us to park our car, enjoy our lunch, and have this meeting, 2 veterans in the United States will have committed suicide. Why should we, as Rotary, care about mental health? In today's day and age, the young high school student packs his backpack. Math homework, check. Geography textbook, check. Bag lunch, check. A weapon filled with specific intent, check. Why should we as Rotary today care about mental health? In our work lives, in our home lives, where the high demands of a stressful work environment in a competitive global economy can leave us with only the leftovers to give our family members when we get home. Why should we as Rotarians care about mental health? And as individuals, today at this moment, can you say the following things about yourself? I'm at peace with myself. I'm at peace with others. I'm happy. I'm resilient. Why should we as Rotarians care about mental health? To explore this, we have a guest today, Andrew Romanoff. Andrew Romanoff became President and Chief Executive Director of Mental Health of America in 2015. Mental Health America is Colorado's leading advocate for the prevention, early intervention, and effective treatment of mental illness. Romanoff served in the Colorado House of Representatives from 2001 to 2009 and as the Speaker of the House from 2005 to 2009. He won the bipartisan acclaim as one of the most effective legislative leaders in America. His leadership earned recognition from more than 50 state and national organizations, including Governing Magazine, which named him 2008 Public Official of the Year. Romanoff earned his bachelor's degree with honors from Yale, a master's degree in public policy from the Harvard's Kennedy School of Government, and a Juris Doctorate from the University of Denver's Strom College of Law. Please welcome Andrew Romanoff.
So I've gone from running the House of Representatives to running a mental health organization. You can supply your own punchline at this point. I want to tell you, just by way of introduction, and thanks, James and Andre both, I got interested in this cause at an early age. When I was a kid, my mom was a social worker and a Democrat. My dad was a prosecutor and a Republican. It is not a combination I recommend. They got divorced, but it does tell you something about where you might want to make a difference. So when I joined the state legislature, I signed up for the Health and Human Services Committee in honor of my mom, and the Criminal Justice Committee in honor of my dad. And I think if you just spent a week with me on those committees at the Capitol, you could see how our failure as a state to prevent some problems up front can really come back to bite us in the budget on the back end. I want to start today just by asking you a question. What's the first thing you noticed about me when I came up? Right, it's a sharp crowd. So, my arm. My shoulder, actually. This is an accident I sustained on a tennis court made of concrete, not of grass, it turns out. How many of you thought when you saw me that this sling and the accident that it must be addressing was just a product of my imagination or a character flaw? How many of you thought that I should be institutionalized on account of it, or incarcerated, or burned at the stake? That is essentially America's approach to mental illness over the last 400 years or so. And it's worth asking why. And what's the difference between the thing that's wrong with my shoulder and the thing that's wrong with so many other parts of our bodies? Now, if you take a look at this accident, you can see it. You can even x-ray it. You can touch it, although I'd rather you didn't, if that's all right. You can understand it. You can appreciate it. Maybe you've even experienced it. But in a way, it's not that different from what might happen to a human brain. Let's see if I can go back a second here. The difference, of course, is that when we speak of brain disease, we're talking about something that is harder to see, harder to understand, more mysterious. It's an organ that's more complex than other parts of the body. And as a result, sometimes we treat brain disease, brain disorders, mental illness differently than we treat injuries or disorders of other parts of the body. And that's what I wanted to talk to you about a little bit today. I want to talk to you about how we go about mending Colorado's mental health. And if you have to take off or nod off at some point, let me just cut to the chase. Not that quite that fast, though. Is it me? Is it my arm? Should I use this hand? I want to talk a little bit about screening, services, and support. Why we ought to be promoting universal screening. All right, now I know that's not me. I'm moving it. Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about how we promote, first, universal screening. Let's take a look at Colorado's population. If you took a look at all 4 million adults in the state, you'd find about 5 to 8% suffer from a serious mental illness. Bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, an illness that's so severe it interferes with or limits basic daily life activities. 5 to 8% of the population. Somewhere between 20 and 25% of the population in a given year will experience any kind of mental health or substance use disorder. And if you extend that across the course of a lifetime, you're talking about roughly half of the population of this or any other state. This is a problem that is widespread. The good news is the symptoms of mental illness manifest early. If you screen for it, you can detect the symptoms in half the cases of mental illness by the age of 14, and in 3/4 of the cases by the age of 24. At Mental Health America of Colorado, and I hope with Rotary support, we believe screening for mental illness ought to become routine, just as commonplace when you go to visit a doctor or a nurse as checking your blood pressure or getting weighed. It's one way, in fact, to destigmatize the illness if it becomes a universal screening instrument. Now, of course, screening doesn't do you much good. Even a diagnosis won't help if there's no treatment on the other end. So James asked me to talk a little bit about one aspect in which Colorado has taken the lead in providing services, specifically crisis services. 2 years ago, in the wake of the tragic shooting at the Aurora Theater, the governor and the legislature decided to invest $20 million in creating a statewide crisis system to link what has been and still to some extent remains a fragmented system of emergency care. And in particular, the administration created a 24/7 hotline, a crisis line staffed by more than 40 professional counselors for which there are no wrong calls. So if you dial 844-493-TALK, 844-493-TALK, and there's some brochures with that number on the table in the front, you'll find at any time of day a counselor who can talk you through the crisis that you're experiencing. That's not the extent of the crisis system. The investment also paid for 14 walk-in crisis centers across the state, for 8 crisis stabilization units that provide intensive inpatient care, for another half a dozen respite care units that provide less intensive residential care for folks around the state, and a series of mobile crisis response units, which consist of mental health professionals and law enforcement officials and peers who can help attend to needs before they become full-blown crises, without the need, in other words, to walk into a crisis center. So that's, in some ways, the back end on the crisis side. I'd argue we're not doing enough as a state or a nation to invest in early intervention, in treatment. And that's important because the good news here is treatment works. If you look at other diseases like heart disease, you'll find treatment effective in roughly 50% of the cases. But if you look at schizophrenia, effective, appropriate treatment can arrest the symptoms, manage the disease in 60% of the cases, and in 70% in instances of depression, or 80% in cases of bipolar disorder. So this is a disease, a set of diseases that are widespread, but treatable if services are available. And that's the bad news. They're not. In fact, if you look at the population of adults in Colorado who experience any mental illness, you'll find only 40% receive treatment. Let me just pause on this point for a minute. Imagine that more than half of the population in the United States who suffered from cancer didn't get any treatment. There would be a national outcry. But that's the case with respect to mental illness. In fact, if you look at instances of substance abuse, you'll find only 15% receiving treatment. So 80% of folks, 85% in the case of substance abuse, going without treatment. And it's not that their problems go away. It's just that as a state, we've decided to treat them in a different way. And we picked a pretty expensive way to do that. This state ranks dead last in the number of psychiatric beds per capita. So folks with serious mental illness will find about 1,300 beds to meet their needs in Colorado. There are 4 times as many prison cells for people with serious mental illness. So we've chosen a back-ended approach here too. We spend about $30,000 a year on a prison cell and upwards of $100,000 just to build one. This is an awfully expensive approach to take to mental illness. That's why I mentioned earlier my mom's side of this argument. Investing in early intervention and screening is probably more effective than treating mental illness in the criminal justice system, which has become the single largest source of care for folks in Colorado who experience mental illness. And it's not just Colorado. If you look across the country, you'll find inmates with mental illness account for roughly 55% of the population in state prisons and 65% of the population in local jails. Folks with mental illness are getting care to some extent, but they're getting it in the criminal justice system instead. And of course, many of them are not getting care at all. They wind up on the streets, living under bridges or in cars. Serious mental illness accounts, by some estimates, for roughly a third of the adult homeless population. And any mental illness afflicts upwards of 70 or 80% of that population. So another consequence of not treating mental illness up front. Of course, the most tragic consequence in some ways is what it does to someone's lifespan. If you look at the population of American adults with serious mental illness, you'll find their life expectancy on average is roughly 25 years less than those without mental illness. Why is that? Is it because they're taking their own lives? In some cases, the answer is yes. But in many cases, it's because the same mental illness that disrupts their cognitive ability also impairs their chances of attending to their other physical needs. So they die, on average, 25 years sooner than someone without a serious mental illness. That puts their life expectancy roughly where the American adult stood 100 years ago. We're condemning folks with serious mental illness to a lifespan about a third less than the rest of us. And of course, as James alluded to in his introduction, suicide remains the most tragic consequence. There was a survey of high school students in Colorado just 2 years ago, and it found, alarmingly, that 7%, 1 out of about every 14 students in Colorado's high schools, had attempted suicide, and twice as many had seriously considered suicide. This is a problem that afflicts not just Colorado, which has one of the nation's highest rates of suicide, but every state. In fact, this year, 40,000 Americans will die by suicide. That's an American every 13 minutes. Imagine that another country declared war on the United States and started killing Americans every 13 minutes, took 40,000 American lives a year. We would be at war. This is just a much quieter war. And it's the consequence, in part, not just of a shortage of services or early intervention or the screening that we're promoting. It's also a consequence of stigma. I know this is a priority for Rotary, and thank you for making it an initiative. But there's a lot more we can do, I think, to replace the stigma that still afflicts this set of illnesses with the support people deserve. There was a survey of Coloradans in the biennial Colorado Health Access Survey. It asked a couple questions of those who said they were in need of mental health care. 20% said they would be concerned about what would happen if someone found out they had a problem. And 30% said they didn't feel comfortable talking with a health professional about what they considered to be personal problems. Maybe you've got a loved one. Maybe you yourself have experienced a mental health disorder. So much stigma and self-stigma attaches to these diseases, and so much dysfunction is a product of the disease itself that folks who need care aren't getting it, and they're dying as a result. This issue is a matter of life and death, and it's not just an abstract issue for me or for my family. This is a woman some of you may have met. She lived in Denver, worked at the Denver Art Museum, and she was my first cousin. She was a little sister to me. She was a graduate of Indiana University and University of Pennsylvania Graduate School. She took a job. She left Denver a couple years ago to take a job in San Francisco at a high-tech firm named Salesforce. She's a very beautiful, well-educated young woman. And on New Year's Day, about 9 months ago, while her mom and dad and I, my aunt and uncle and I, were celebrating New Year's Day, my cousin Melissa walked into the backyard and killed herself. It was the worst imaginable act, one that we're going to spend the rest of our lives trying to understand, because it came without any warning, without any evidence of the depression she must have been suffering. And if you want to know what happens to mental illness when it is undetected and undiagnosed and untreated, this is one of the consequences. Melissa, to me, is in some ways the face of mental illness. I recognize the media has given James Holmes that role. But the truth is, most folks with mental illness are not committing crimes or violent. They're more likely, in fact, to be victims of crime than perpetrators. This is a cause that touches every family in Colorado, every corner of our state, every part of our state government. And it is a crisis that I think we have ignored for too long. I'm glad that Rotary's making a difference. I recognize the work this organization has done in Colorado and across the world in treating and in some cases eradicating other deadly diseases. I'd argue this ought to be Rotary's next battleground, and I'm glad you're putting some resources into that effort. Let me just close with a couple thoughts about some of the tools to which you might turn. I talked a little bit about the Colorado Crisis Service Line, and again, you can find a card on the way out if you want to promote that number. I'd also encourage you to become trained in what's called mental health first aid. Some people call this CPR for the mind. It is an 8-hour course. It's free. You can find a location near you if you go to the website, which is MHFACO, like mentalhealthfirstaidcolorado.org. And you can get trained to recognize some of the signs of mental illness and appropriate ways as a layperson to respond and to help folks get the care they need. Frankly, I think everybody in Colorado ought to get trained in mental health first aid. I did when I started this job, and I hope you'll take advantage of that opportunity as well. The last resource is the organization I now head, Mental Health America of Colorado. We've been around for 62 years, and we're part of a national organization called Mental Health America. We're in the business of promoting access to services, better treatment, early intervention, and universal screening. You can learn a little bit more about our organization on our website, which is mha.org/mentalhealth. denverrotary.colorado.org. The last thing I'll say is this. If you went to a doctor and you had a separated shoulder or a lump or a bump somewhere in your body, and your doctor said, well, you know, that may be a problem, may even be cancerous. Why don't you come back when it reaches stage 4? The doctor would be disbarred. But essentially what we've done to mental illness is ignored the symptoms until they reach stage 4. Mental Health America nationally is arguing that we ought to intervene before stage 4. That's a slogan we've trademarked. And I hope as parents, as employers, as community leaders, as human beings, we'll take some inspiration from that approach. We'll intervene before stage 4. Thanks for sharing your time with me. Do you have time for questions?
So we do have a couple of minutes for a couple of questions. So Andrew,
Sure.
if you want to field them. Just keep on holding the button and put the screen. But just go ahead and ask a question. You repeat it.
Andrew, thank you for being here today, and very sorry about your cousin.
Thank you.
I just want, in case you're not going to do this, Andre, I just want to make sure our members have a little bit more of an idea of our mental health initiative. Our club, along with several other clubs in the district, a couple of years ago, decided we needed to do something about mental health, and in particular try to address stigma, although some clubs in the district are doing some other things. If you have an interest, contact me, contact James is involved. RJ Ross is not here, but he's involved. Chuck's out of the, Everill's out of the country, but he's involved. There are several clubs involved, and we are putting together a website with a variety of programs that clubs can put into effect. The other thing I want to emphasize is the disconnect, and Andrew, you may want to elaborate on this, between violence and mental health. That's what drives the stigma, and the press doesn't create the connection, but they don't dispel it.
Yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out. And look, the story, man treats depression, resumes work, continues happy life, not a headline. Man opens fire in a crowded theater or flies an airplane into the wall of a mountain. That's a headline. So the disproportionate cases of mental illness producing deadly violence, which are the exception, not the rule, happen to be a lot more newsworthy. And I think you're right. That creates stigma. If you're suffering from mental illness and you turn on the TV and you see a story about James Holmes, the last thing you want to do is identify with him or acknowledge a problem. And I think what we're trying to do at Mental Health America is promote more representative and accurate and supportive accounts. We're not interested in whitewashing this disease because the truth is it can be deadly. But we want to tell folks a couple things. One, this is real. It's not a badge of shame. It's not a figment of your imagination. It's not a character flaw. It's a disease, a disorder. And eventually I think science will show the biochemical, the neurological, the physiological sources of mental illness, just the way that science has been able to trace the roots of other diseases. So the disease is real. Treatment is available. That's the second point. A lot of folks think, well, there's no good in getting treatment. I'm going to sit on a couch for the rest of my life and nothing's ever going to change. The truth is, as I suggested, treatment, if appropriate and timely, can work. And not always in preventing or curing the disease, but at least in managing the symptoms and helping folks resume regular lives. And unfortunately, the last message, of course, is that treatment remains in short supply for a number of reasons that we could talk about, and that's where I hope Rotary will put its shoulder to the wheel, if you will.
Thank you for being here. I was wondering, I have read that years and years ago when we start closing down residential treatment centers for mentally disturbed people, now the jails are where we treat mentally disturbed people. I'm wondering what the position of your organization is about the need to reinstitute, resume having more residential treatment programs.
Well, we believe there is a shortage of residential treatment programs, both in institutional settings, because Colorado ranks so low in psychiatric beds, and in non-institutional settings. And you're right, by the way. There was a wave of deinstitutionalization that swept through the country in the 70s, more or less. And the theory at the time held, if you shut down these state mental hospitals, where conditions were horrible — my mom used to work in one — community groups will spring up and take care of folks in those circumstances. That didn't happen. So a lot of the people with those diseases ended up on the streets or dead. And in some ways, what was called deinstitutionalization really ought to be called transinstitutionalization, because, as you said, we move folks from one institution to another. I'm just arguing that turning the criminal justice system into our chief source of treatment for folks with mental illness is probably the most expensive and least therapeutic approach that we could take.
We have time for one more question.
Yes, I was wondering if what you would envision would be the steps for the medical professional structure and culture in order to get to the point where screening was a part of the accepted procedure along with normal physical exam.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question, Dan. So there is good news here, too. Colorado is taking a lead in integrating mental or behavioral health into the primary care system. In fact, there's a large state grant and a task force working at doing exactly that, getting providers in the primary care system trained to administer a screening instrument, and ideally, beyond that, to actually offer care in an integrated setting. Here's why. If you are lucky enough to get a diagnosis, so your mental illness does not go, as my cousins did, undiagnosed, but you're told you need to go across town to the mental health center, which are doing fabulous work, chances are you're not going to make that trip because of the stigma that attaches to the name on the building, because of the logistical concerns. You're better off getting treated on site. And if we could figure out a way to integrate those services, starting with screening, using some of the instruments that are available, I think we're more likely to reduce the attrition. The truth is, when you walk into a doctor's office now, or you meet with a nurse or a physician assistant, he or she doesn't ask, do you want to be weighed? Do you want me to check your blood pressure? It's a matter of routine. And if we make mental health screening similarly universal, similarly commonplace, in some ways we can sidestep the debate over stigma. Reducing stigma is the goal because we want to make it more likely for folks to seek the care they need. But if we can deliver that care automatically, in effect, at least at the screening and diagnosis stage, in some ways I think we can make it more likely for folks to treat this just like any other illness, just one that happens to be a lot more complex and still mysterious.
I have one quick question about the 844 number, which seems like a great resource, but, you know, if you need it, are you going to think, is there a feed-in from 911? Are these 911 operators trained to hand off the call?
That's a good question, and I don't actually know the answer. Maybe somebody else does. The goal is to get that number, 844-493-TALK, just as well known as 911 or 411. It's not, and it's longer, and maybe we need to get it shorter, like, say, 3 digits. But I'm hoping the system can cross-pollinate in the way that you're suggesting. I don't know the answer. I'll try to find out.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Let's hear it. Andrew?
Thank you very much.
Don't sit down yet. Don't sit down. You know, when I lost my eyesight suddenly, and I was told that I needed to go and get a caseworker from the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation to learn to use a cane, it was humiliating to me. And I was like, you know, we're Rotarians. I don't need help. I'm a doer. I'm not a taker. And that stigma that we feel, you know, about accepting help. And it just so happened that very short before that in our Bible study group, we're talking about what is humility. And we said that humility is the ability to understand that you need help, to accept help. And I think that a little bit of what Andrew was talking about today is also recognizing that we need to be humble sometimes and understand that either one of us, either yourself or somebody in your family, could use some help and reaching out and asking for that help. You know what you call it when an Argentinian has an arm in a sling? It's a speech impediment, right? So, is it surprising that even with only one arm, Andrew truly enlightened us today and gave us a tremendous presentation? Andrew, over here, with help of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and our club, we will inoculate 150 children against polio in your name. So thank you for being here today. So, in closing, I say that I'm a Repocrat, so that it means I'm 3-part Republican, 1-part Democrat. So it means that I have 3 Republicans friends, and then I have to go and find a Democrat friend, right? No, in Rotary we say in our 4-way test, will it build better friendships? And we're not Rotarians only when we walk in through that door. We wear our pin with pride every day of our lives. And we have to always think, as we go through life, will it build better friendships? Next week we're going to have Ambassador Chris Hill come and speak to us about diplomacy in the Middle East. Now let me pose this to you. If we can talk about diplomacy in the Middle East, where the enmities and the antagonism come with roots of hundreds and thousands of years, and we want them to have diplomacy, what about us? What about that one person that we see a difference with, that we cannot really connect with? That friend of ours, that old friend of ours, that neighbor, that person that we had a hard time with. Why don't we reach out a hand and tell them that we are Rotarians and that we want to work together? So keep that in mind as you go through the week, that as Rotarians, it's all about better friendships. So let's go out and build them, and come next week to listen to Ambassador Chris Hill. I think it's truly relevant. Just as discussion today, you voted with your feet by coming today. You understand the importance of this subject. I promise you next week will not disappoint you. And it's another great person from the EU, like our own Vet Nanda, that will come and present to us. So have a terrific week. Thanks for being here today.